So today we shall see about the finance committee, the diocese. Canons 492 and 493. The finance committee also performs a part of the diocesan curia. So earlier in the last class, we had seen about the diocesan curia, diocesan vicars, and so on. So this finance committee also is the part of the diocesan curia. It is composed of at least 3 financial and legal experts named by the bishop, who presides over the committee in person or by means of a delegate. So this committee is composed of at least 3 financial and legal experts. They should be experts in these matters. Financial and legal matters. And bishop presides over the committee in person or by means of a delegate. Its main task is setting the annual budget following the indications of the diocesan bishop. The main task is to set the annual budget. According to the indications of the diocesan bishop, its bishop. And approving the accounts for year-end income and expenditure. So all the financial matters they have to deal. Approving the budget or preparing the budget and approving the accounts for year-end income and expenditure. And in the most important affairs of the diocese, the bishop has the obligation to listen to their opinion. In the most important affairs, the bishop has to listen to the opinion of the committee, financial committee. And also for the issues of extraordinary administration. For issues of extraordinary administration, he must obtain their consent. He must obtain their consent, without which the affair will be invalid. For issues of extraordinary administration, he must get the consent of the finance committee. If he doesn't get the consent of the finance committee, then that affair will be invalid. For example, with regard to the sales which exceed a certain amount, in one of previous lectures I said they have to fix the maximum sum, and if it is exceeding the sum, and he has to get the consent. and without the consent, if he does, that affair will be invalid. So Canon 1277. In carrying out acts of administration which, in the light of the financial situation of the diocese, are of major importance, the diocesan bishop must consult the finance committee and the college of consultors. For acts of extraordinary administration, if it is ordinary administration of the finance, consultation is okay, is enough. But for the extraordinary affairs, for acts of extraordinary administration, except in cases expressly provided for in the universal law or stated in the documents of foundation, the diocesan bishop needs the consent of the committee and of the college of consultors. It is for the episcopal conference to determine what are to be regarded as acts of extraordinary administration. So, for the acts of extraordinary administration, consent of the committee, finance committee, and the college of consultors is required. For the ordinary administration, the consultation is enough to consult. So both are different, consultation, consent. Next, the diocesan financial administrator. What we have seen just now is the finance committee. Now diocesan financial administrator. The financial administrator is nominated by the bishop. He is nominated by the bishop. To administer the goods of the diocese under his authority. To administer the goods of the diocese under his authority. It is a technical function for which he must select. It is a technical function for which he must select a truly expert and honest person. He must select a truly expert and honest person. So diocesan administrator should be expert and honest person, otherwise he will misuse. His task is the ordinary daily administration of the budget. His task is the ordinary daily administration of the budget approved by the finance committee. Approved by the finance committee. He can also carry out other tasks assigned to him by the bishop. Along with the administration of the finance, he can also take up or carry out other tasks if the bishop entrusts to him. Every year he must present the budget of income and expenditures to the finance committee for approval. Every year he must present the budget of income and expenditure to the finance committee for approval. Canon 494. 494. Just listen. 494 Canon, paragraph 1. In each diocese, a financial administrator is to be appointed by the bishop after consulting the College of Consultors and the Finance Committee. The financial administrator is to be expert in financial matters and of truly understanding integrity. So he must be expert and honest. The financial administrator is to be appointed for 5 years, but when this period has expired, may be appointed for further terms of 5 years. While in office, he or she is not to be removed except for a grave reason to be estimated by the bishop after consulting the College of Consultors and the Finance Committee. Paragraph 3. It is the responsibility of the financial administrator under the authority of the bishop to administer the goods of the diocese in accordance with the plan of the Finance Committee and to make those payments from diocesan funds which the bishop or his delegates have lawfully authorized. Paragraph 4. At the end of the year, the financial administrator must give the Finance Committee an account of income and expenditure. So all these points are dealt in this paragraph which I gave you just now. Next, the Council of Priests. The Council of Priests. Canons 495 to 501. Canons 495 to 501. The Council of Priests is a college of priests which represents the presbyterium of the diocese. The Council of Priests is a college of priests which represents the presbyterium of the diocese and constitutes the presbyterium of the diocese and constitutes, as it were, the bishop's senate. Constitutes the bishop's senate. What's his task? Assisting him in pastoral government. The bishop's senate or the college of priests or council of priests his task is to assist him in pastoral government. It must have its own statutes of functioning. It must have its own statutes approved by the bishop. Approved by the bishop, that determine the way its members are designated and its mode of procedure. So statutes for what? How they are to be chosen, designated to the college of priests, or how they should function, the procedure of the functioning. So about half of its members are elected by the priests who carry out an office in the diocese. Half of the total number are elected by the priests who carry out an office in the diocese, whether they are diocesan, secular or religious. Others are members in virtue of the office that is entrusted to them. Others are members in virtue of the office that is entrusted to them. So for example, the vicars, the rector of the seminary, or the financial administrator. So by virtue of the office, automatically they become the members of this senate. Others finally are freely designated by the diocesan bishop. So half are elected, a few are selected by the virtue of their office, and the rest are designated by the diocesan bishop. So they form as a college of priests. It belongs to the bishop to convoke it. It belongs to the bishop to convoke it, to preside over it, to preside over it, to dissolve it, to dissolve it, to determine the questions to be examined by it, to determine the questions to be examined by it, or to accept those which are proposed. So it's the bishop's right and authority to convoke it, to preside over it, to dissolve it if it is required, necessary, to determine the questions to be examined by it. Okay, he prepares the agenda to be discussed, those which are proposed. In every case, the council has only a consultative vote. A consent is not required. The council has only a consultative vote. And cannot act without the diocesan bishop. In every case, the council has only a consultative vote, and they cannot act without the diocesan bishop. But the diocesan bishop must listen to the college of priests or senate members for the important questions or matters of the diocese. Next, the College of Consultors. The College of Consultors, Canon 502. Among the members of the Council of Priests, the diocesan bishops select some. So, College of Consultors are from where? From the Council of Priests, from the Senate members. Among the members of the Council of Priests, the diocesan bishops select some. What's the number? How many should be there? Not less than 6, but not more than 12. Not less than 6, not more than 12. Who form the College of Consultors? This college is called to advise the bishop in a more continuous way. This College of Consultors is called to advise the bishop in a more continuous way. So for all the matters of the diocese, affairs of the diocese, not only during the time of transfers, but also other matters of the diocese are discussed with them, the College of Consultors. So their work is more of a continuous manner. It's a long period. The law establishes the cases in which the bishop must ask its opinion. The law establishes the cases in which the bishop must ask its opinion, and those in which he must obtain its consent. So matters of less importance, so ordinary matters, the consultation is enough. But for the most important affairs, you should get or obtain the consent of the College of Consultors. For example, acts of extraordinary administration of goods. All acts of extraordinary administration of goods. Canons 1277, 1292. When the see is vacant, which one? The diocesan see is vacant. The College of Consultors is not dissolved. When the see is vacant, the College of Consultors is not dissolved. All other committees will get dissolved except the College of Consultors. On the contrary, it belongs to it to elect the diocesan administrator. On the contrary, it belongs to the College of Consultors to elect the diocesan administrator, who governs the diocese until the nomination of a new diocesan bishop. So the diocesan administrator will govern the diocese till the new diocesan bishop is nominated. The diocesan administrator has a reduced power. He has a reduced power. And for this reason, he needs the consent of the College of Consultors for acts of major importance. Since he has got a reduced less power, he needs the consent of the College of Consultors for the affairs or acts of major importance. Canon 502. Paragraph 1. From among the members of the Council of Priests, the diocesan bishop freely appoints not fewer than 6 and not more than 12 priests who are for 5 years to constitute the College of Consultors. To it belong the functions determined by law. So according to the law, they have to function their office. On the expiry of the 5-year period, however, it continues to exercise its functions until the new college is constituted. Till the new College of Consultors is constituted or made, they keep continuing. Paragraph 2. The diocesan bishop presides over the College of Consultors. If, however, the see is impeded or vacant, that person presides who in the interim takes the bishop's place, or if he has not yet been appointed, then the priest in the College of Consultors who is senior by ordination. So, the senior member of the College of Consultors will call for a meeting if the see is impeded or vacant, and they elect the diocesan administrator. The Episcopal Conference can determine that the functions of the College of Consultors be entrusted to the Cathedral Chapter. Paragraph 4. Unless the law provides otherwise, in a vicariate or prefecture apostolic, the functions of the College of Consultors belong to the Council of the Mission mentioned in the Canon 495, paragraph 2. So, these are the functions of the College of Consultors. Next, the chapter of canons. So, in this canon we heard this term. So, 502 paragraph 3, the Episcopal Conference can determine that the functions of the College of Consultors be entrusted to the Cathedral Chapter. So, what is that we will see. The chapters of canons, in that two divisions are there. The chapter of canons carries out the most solemn liturgical functions in the cathedral. Nowadays it is not most common, very rarely it is seen. So, solemn liturgical functions are looked after by the earlier, but now the liturgical committee of the diocese. The chapter of canons carries out the most solemn liturgical functions in the cathedral and the other tasks which law or the bishop entrusts to them. And the other tasks which law or the bishop entrusts to them. It's a very ancient institution. It's a very ancient institution which first performed the roles which are now carried out by the two previously mentioned colleges. Which first performed the roles which are now carried out by the two previously mentioned colleges. Which are they? Which we have mentioned just previously. The College of Priests and the College of Consultors. So, now they are carrying out the task of the chapter of canons. Previously only the chapter of canons they were carrying out these tasks, but now in modern time the Council of Priests and the College of Consultors are doing the work. So, a chapter of canons is a corporate body of priests. A chapter of canons is a corporate body of priests attached by ecclesiastical authority to a church for the purpose of performing the more solemn liturgical functions. For the purpose of performing the more solemn liturgical functions. The chapter of canons are of two types. A chapter of canons are of two types: cathedral and collegiate. Cathedral and collegiate. So chapter of canons can be cathedral and collegiate. So chapter of cathedral canons is a corporate body of priests attached to the cathedral church only. A body of priests attached to the cathedral church only. And what is a collegiate? It's a body of priests attached to a church other than the cathedral church. There's a slight difference. Body of priests attached to a church other than the cathedral church. Next, the pastoral council. The pastoral council, canons 511 to 514. So for the chapter of canons, the canons are 503 to 510. The pastoral council, canons 511 to 514. The diocesan bishops can establish a pastoral council. The diocesan bishops can establish a pastoral council whose responsibility is to investigate under the authority of the bishop all those things which pertain to pastoral works. So all the things that pertain to the pastoral work, the diocesan bishop investigates with the help of the pastoral council. Under the authority of the bishop, all those things which pertain to pastoral works, to ponder them and to propose practical conclusions about them. So to discuss different aspects of the pastoral ministry in the diocese, and also to propose practical conclusions about them. Canon 511. It is composed of faithful of every type, the members of the pastoral council. It is composed of faithful of every type. above all laity. Faithful of every type, above all laity, who are in full communion with the church. So, who are in full communion with the Catholic Church? Yeah. So, you see, certain terms are being appearing in different places. So, therefore, its meaning and concept should be clear to you. So, who are in full communion with the church and are distinguished by proven faith, good morals, and outstanding prudence. So, those who are in the pastoral council, they should have good faith, morals, and outstanding prudence, chosen in a manner determined by the bishop. Chosen in a manner determined by the bishop, so that they are like a reflection of the entire diocese. So that they are like a reflection of the entire diocese. So, if they are of good faith and morals and outstanding prudence, then the diocese also appears to be good. So, if they are bad, it also reflects the condition of the diocese in a bad way. Now we shall discuss about the parishes. Parish. Canons 515 to 552. 515 to 552. So, as I had said previously, every particular church must be divided into parishes. Every particular church must be divided into parishes. What is the definition of the parish? The parish is a community of the faithful The parish is a community of the faithful constituted in a stable way, within the particular church. So, parish is a community of the faithful constituted in a stable manner, stable way, in a continuous and permanent basis, where within the particular church its pastoral care is entrusted under the authority of the diocesan bishop. Its pastoral care is entrusted under the authority of the diocesan bishop to a pastor. Here pastor is a parish priest, who is its proper shepherd. The parish priest is the proper shepherd, but under the pastoral care of the diocesan bishop. Canon 515, paragraph 1. The parish is a community open to all. It's a community open to all, and where all called to collaborate in a concrete way. Open to all, and all are called to collaborate in a concrete way, according to their own vocation possibilities. Lay people, religious, both men and women, in their own way, they have to collaborate in a concrete way for the good of the parish, according to their own vocation and possibilities, in communion with the diocese and with the universal church. So all the faithful must cooperate in the parish, and all the parish communities also work in communion with the diocese and with the universal church. The diocesan bishop erects, suppresses, or modifies parishes. The diocesan bishop erects, suppresses, or modifies parishes after having heard the opinion of the council of priests. So if there is an important matter or issue to be dealt with regard to erection, suppression, and modification of the parishes, he hears the opinion of the council of priests. Once it has been established, parish has a juridical personality by law. Parish has juridical personality by law, and its representative is a pastor. Once it is lawfully erected, the parish becomes the juridical entity by law. Every parish has its parish church. Every parish has its parish church, to which the other churches of the territory belong. Every parish has its parish church, to which the other churches of the territory belong. For example, rectories, churches of religious, and now we have a few substations also. So all come under that parish. So every parish is territorially limited, right? So it has got its own territorial boundary, and all other churches, both religious and other substations according to territory, come under that particular parish. The pastor, as proper shepherd of the parish community, exercises in it under the authority of the bishop So all the parishes should have communion with the particular church, right? And all the particular churches should have the communion with the universal church. Exercises in it under the authority of the bishop the functions of teaching, sanctifying, and governing. So as the bishop has got these three functions in the diocese. The parish priest also has got the same functions in the parish. Functions of teaching, sanctifying and governing, together with the help of other priests, deacons, religious or members of the laity. Together with the help of other priests, deacons, religious or members of the laity. It normally belongs to the diocesan bishop. It normally belongs to the diocesan bishop, having determined the suitability of the candidate, having determined the suitability of the candidate to freely appoint the pastor. So the bishop appoints, after having examined the suitability of the candidate, he appoints as the pastor of the parish. Canon 522. It is necessary that a parish priest have the benefit of stability, and therefore he is to be appointed for an indeterminate period of time. Is not a determinate period of time, not fixed time. So indeterminate period of time, the diocesan bishop may appoint him for a specified period of time only if the episcopal conference has by decree allowed this. So according to the canon law, there is no fixed time of the appointment for the pastor. But if the episcopal conference fixes a determinate time for the parish priest, supposing 5 years or 6 years or 8 years, so they can follow. But as for the code of canon law, the appointment is indeterminate. When he turns 75, he is invited to represent, or he is invited to present his resignation. The retirement age is 75. Normally, the pastor is a priest to whom only one parish is entrusted. Normally, only one parish is entrusted to his care. But in certain circumstances, it can happen that he is simultaneously pastor of more than one parish. It happens also. If there is any urgent need, lack of priests, so another parish also will be entrusted to him for his care. It can happen that he is simultaneously pastor of more than one parish, or that one or more parishes are entrusted to a team of priests. The pastoral community is another term. It is not that prevalent now, but in Europe, so in a particular area, some parishes are there, and they form a pastoral community, and one will be the head of all the churches, for all the churches, but other priests also will be there to support him and to administer the spiritual needs and the sacraments. Likewise, if because of a scarcity of priests, some parish activities must be entrusted to persons who are not priests. If because of a scarcity of priests, some parish activities must be entrusted to persons who are not priests. For example, deacons, religious communities, etc. So deacons, you have to understand their duties, canonical duties and obligations and their competencies. So deacon cannot celebrate mass, right? So here it doesn't mean that he can celebrate mass, but only other activities, parish activities, they can function. So whatever, so baptism he can give, preaching he can do. So because there are no priests, sufficient priests, and religious communities or sisters visiting the sick and distribution of the Holy Communion, etc. As the shepherd, the pastor is to ensure above all that the faithful participate abundantly in the means of salvation. As shepherd of the parish, the pastor is to ensure that the faithful participate abundantly in the means of salvation. Which are the means of salvation? The Word of God, the sacraments, prayer and works of charity. The Word of God, the sacraments, prayer and works of charity. The law entrusts to him certain parish functions which others may not exercise without his authorization. The law entrusts to him, here the pastor, certain parish functions which others may not exercise without his authorization. Baptisms, assistance at marriages, attention to the dying, funerals, and the more solemn celebration of the Eucharist on Sundays and holy days of obligation, etc. So these are the parish functions, and others cannot function in his parish without his authorization. So earlier also I said, even if I am a priest and I hail from that parish, I cannot administer the sacraments and celebration of the Eucharist without his authorization or permission. In addition, he must take adequate care of all the administrative In addition, he must take adequate care of all the administrative and material aspects of the parish. The pastor must take adequate care of all the administrative and material aspects of the parish. Places and objects of worships, places and objects of worships, parochial registers, archives, publications, administration of goods, and cultural patrimony. You should be very careful and should take adequate care of all other administrative and material aspects such as places and objects of worships and parochial registers is very, very important. Okay, parochial registers. So, which are the registers? Baptism register, confirmation register, marriage register, death, okay, the inventories, okay, as a cultural patrimony. If any valuable things are there of the parish, there is one inventory, a copy should be given to the diocese, one in the parochial office. So it should be maintained very well. Little negligence enough and the faithful lose their certificate. So you may administer the sacrament of the baptism, but if you don't enter into the register, and after you, those who come may not be immediately, we can verify if it is immediately. Immediately means 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. If it is more than 20, 30 years, who will remember? So many difficulties will be there. That's why you should be very careful in the administrative and material aspects of the parish. And it is also obligation of the parish priest to celebrate Mass on Sundays for the faithful, for the intention of the faithful. So if on Sunday is not practical, at least once a week, you can choose another day. But once a week, one day you should celebrate the Mass for the intention of the faithful. So in the diocese, the bishop. The pastor must regularly reside in his own parish and not to be absent without informing the local ordinary. So that a substitute can be provided. So he should reside in his own parish and should not be absent. If he is absent, he should inform the local ordinary so that he can make alternative arrangements to look after the spiritual needs of the people. So just read Canon 533, paragraph 1, 533, paragraph 1. The parish priest is obliged to reside in the parochial house near the church. In particular cases, however, where there is a just reason, the local ordinary may permit him to reside elsewhere, especially in a house common to several priests, provided the carrying out of the parochial duties is properly and suitably catered for. Paragraph 2. So he should be residing in the parochial house near to the parish, or with the permission of the bishop. If the parochial house is not there, if there is some other house where that is meant for other priests also, he can stay and look after the needs of the parish. Paragraph 2. Unless there is a grave reason to the contrary, the parish priest may each year be absent on holidays from his parish for a period not exceeding 1 month, continuous or otherwise. The days which the parish priest spends on the annual spiritual retreat are not reckoned in this period of vacation. For an absence from the parish of more than a week, however, the parish priest is bound to advise the local ordinary, inform the local ordinary if he is going to be absent. Paragraph 3. It is for the diocesan bishop to establish norms by which, during the parish priest's absence, the care of the parish is provided for by a priest with the requisite faculties. So he can entrust the care of the parish to another one with the faculties of hearing the confession, celebration of the mass, and the administering the sacraments, etc. Regarding financial affairs, there is a parochial finance committee. This is in the parish level. So in the diocesan level we had seen already. Regarding financial affairs, there is a parochial finance committee with at least 2 advisors and governed by the norms given by the bishop. With at least 2 advisors. So at least 2, what does it mean? Not less than 2. Can be more than 2. And governed by the norms given by the bishop. So this finance committee studies the problems of the parish, proposing solutions, and they can help the pastor in the administration of goods, and realizing certain functions, especially the financial matters. If the diocesan bishop judges fit, a pastoral council is also to be established in the parish. Pastoral council also to be established in the parish. Under the presidency of the pastor, the council includes the other clerics who participate in the pastoral work. The council includes the other clerics who participate in the pastoral work and other members of the faithful. So in the pastoral council, if there are other clerics or religious priests, so religious women, sisters, they also can be formed in the pastoral council, and the faithful, of course. Its aim is to promote various initiatives Its aim is to promote various initiatives and to organize the parochial activities. Aim is to promote various initiatives and to organize the parochial activities. So the council is governed by the norms, is understood. Council is governed by the norms given by the bishop, and they have only what kind of vote? Consultative vote. They have only a consultative vote. So the role of the faithful is understood. They have to cooperate with the pastor, with their life of piety and apostolate, and in other activities for the good of the parish and growth of the parish and benefit of the faithful. They have to continue or collaborate responsibly with the pastor.